Yeah, so we're here to chat about how brands connect in a virtual world. And it's interesting, it feels like a continuation of a dialogue that we've been having over the past couple of years as Co's worked with LinkedIn on this theme of how to keep building a mission-driven brand that truly connects with people in a virtual context, and specifically for LinkedIn, really connect people to economic opportunity. But obviously now here we are having the conversation in a very different context that's really challenging. There's the pandemic and its economic impact. There's obviously the Black Lives Matter moment in the US. And when we last spoke, I was really struck by your view that this isn't some kind of a phase that we're going to come out of. It's more a series of one-way secular shifts that are really going to frame a different reality for people and businesses alike in the future. And what I'd love to do is just delve into those shifts with you in, a bit more detail today.
Yeah, I look forward to it.
Great. So why don't we start with one that's literally close to home, which is the shift that we're all experiencing of home as the new workplace. How is that going for you personally?
Yeah, so I'm fortunate. I have work I can do from home. I have kids who are tweens and teens, so somewhat self-sufficient in a home context. I've seen them step up and do their chores. So in a lot of ways, I feel like I'm in a very fortunate situation relative to a lot of people experiencing the current pandemic and the associated economic impacts of it. It's a hard time to parent. It's a hard time to lead. There's a lot of emotion. I think trying to understand the context of everyone you're working with is incredibly complex.
Mm.
And I think there is, to your point, I think there's a lot we're learning during this time that's going to serve us well. So I don't think any of us would ask for the current condition, but I do hope as we move through it together, we hold on to some of the things that we're learning to this time, just the vulnerability, the level playing field, and the ability to kind of connect the sense of mission and hope that we can create a better future are things that I hope we really do anchor on and carry through.
Yeah.
So Neil, let me ask you the same. How's it going for you?
Look, I'm with you. I feel so fortunate that I'm in a line of work that I can do from home. So many people aren't or are at home because they don't have a job right now. So fundamentally, I'm trying to be, grateful. I also have a tween actually at home. She's been channeling her inner introvert as a superpower, learning computer animation. It's been lovely to just be able to spend more time with her. I think in general, I'm just fascinated by how the personal context is now the professional context. And in a weird way, while we're physically so much more separate, I feel closer to some of my colleagues because I understand their personal context much more. And I think we're all being a bit more authentic, even if it's mediated by video. So that's been interesting for me. I'd
I
love
love
to.
that. I love that. That's one of the things we're talking about as we talk as a company about what returning to the office looks like. How do we lose that? How do we not lose that incredible kind of humanizing part of the fact that we all know each other's dogs and family members, and there's been an enormous, I think, level of compassion and just understanding interruptions. People, I think, are incredibly compassionate towards interruptions or requirements, and I just hope when we get back into the workplace, a lot of that sticks.
Yeah, you're right. I think we've all become a little more relaxed and less formal, and that's been a good thing. I'd love to broaden the question a bit and just ask how your marketing communications team are doing at LinkedIn and what you're doing to support their culture and community.
Yeah, so maybe I'll divide in two things. There's this sort of what are we doing with the work, and then the humans and how are we taking care of each other from a human's perspective. So the work, I think, like many marketing communications, it's been full court press since the beginning. So everything around how we've had to do creative has entirely changed, and it changes week by week. I'm sure, Neil, you are seeing this at Co-Collective, but we'll create, in the first wave when we were all moved from home, the conversation was very much around on LinkedIn was like work from home environments, and people were taking pictures, and there was a whole conversation around work from home environments. Creative team created this beautiful campaign for LinkedIn around working from home. within the week of creating it, the conversation had shifted and the economic data was starting to come out and the massive unemployment. And all of a sudden, this beautiful asset we created seemed completely tone deaf to the environment we were in, which is one of enormous amount of human suffering. So I use that as just an example of this idea of being relevant, being authentic, being sensitive to the situation has just made what we do more important and I think harder than ever. And so on the work we do, it's just an incredibly dynamic situation around making sure that we're supporting our customers, supporting our teams, doing what we need to do from a work perspective, and recognizing that that's changing what we do at a rate I've never seen before in my professional life.
Wow.
On the human side, it's remembering that these are humans that are going through all of this, and they're going through this professionally while they have entirely different personal challenges. Some have family members they're taking care of, either older family members, younger family members, the fear. People have people they know and family members who've been impacted by COVID, some who have died. So I think that's incredibly, the work is harder and more intense and kind of in a lot of ways more important than ever. At the same time, people have a lot of other things pressing upon them. And so how do you support those humans in this environment so that they feel like they can manage through this and are set up for success? So I think it's just being incredibly human first. It's understanding that there's no one formula that fits everyone, and we just need to understand each individual's context and come together as a team more than ever to try and work through this period.
Yeah, thank you for that. I mean, it's interesting. It also seems to touch on leadership style, like the old-fashioned style of leadership. There's one way to do things, and I'm modeling it. That kind of breaks down when there's no longer one right way to do things. How do you think about that in terms of leadership style?
It's I think it's incredibly hard to be a leader right now. We're spending an enormous amount of time. I'm spending a personal amount of time with managers and leaders in my organization because, again, the results that managers and leaders are being asked to drive, especially in times of uncertainty where people are wondering about jobs and so forth, is really, really high. And then you're asking them to be incredibly compassionate to team members. Circumstances might not be able to work for 3 hours during the afternoon because they're homeschooling children, and that's something, especially managers younger in their career, have never been taught how to do, and even very experienced managers are still trying to figure out that right balance. So I do think as a manager, it's just around being incredibly connected, compassionate, kind of understanding that individual, giving people permission. I think being very honest about my own personal struggles and things that are going right and wrong has been, I've heard from my team, quite freeing. So yeah, I think from a leadership perspective, this idea of I have all the answers, no one has all the answers. So no one's going to believe that for a minute if you try and pretend that you do. With that said, I think leaders still have to be able to help teams feel a sense of confidence, a sense of we're going to get through this. I found in my career, I've managed through a lot of different crises. And so just teams hearing that I know how to manage through these, I know how to manage through uncertainty is helpful. So it's a little bit of both. Like you still need a leader at the front leading through and setting a path for we will get through this, and we know we'll get through this, and there is a better future on the other side. So I do believe teams need leadership and optimism, and then they also need a human who understands that it's not necessarily going to be a clean path to get there.
Right. It's like you're adding that almost bottom up nurturing capacity, in addition to the top down, directing capacity. That's been certainly a journey for me as I've worked with my team. To the point about some of these shifts to permanent, how permanent is this one, the working from home? Do you think we'll ever really, come back to work in the same way?
I mean, I think this is a fascinating conversation right now. I know as a LinkedIn executive team, we're spending time on this, hours on this every week, because I think it's such an interesting time to try and not just fall back to what we had before, but make sure we are actually grabbing onto some of these learnings and designing what work will look like in the future. So we are trying to be really, really thoughtful about it. We did an employee survey to ask that very question because we decided, like, rather than top down trying to make that answer, and not surprising, probably the overwhelming majority of employees want some balance. They do still want ways to connect human. I think everyone's kind of missing that human connection piece, but people are also seeing the very real benefits of not long commutes and a bit more flexibility in how to get things done. So my sense is that we'll move into a very hybrid situation. I think all the questions around, like, what does a culture look like in a hybrid situation? And when you have a super strong culture, how do you translate that? So I think those are very real questions that none of us have the perfect answers for. But my sense is it won't go back to exactly what it was, and kind of shame on us if it does. I mean, I think also about just not how our workplace is changing, but how's the world? Like, I've been fascinated by the fact that the earth has repaired itself during this time. And so how do we hold on to some of those things, that some of our actions have very, very positive ramifications on the earth, and what's our responsibility also to take some of those into account?
Yeah, yeah, well said. I think that connects to a broader view, right? That there's this, the second shift I want to talk about is the all up global shift to virtual mode that was already happening in many ways and has been massively accelerated. And I'm fascinated by how LinkedIn's experiencing that, because you've always convened a virtual professional community. So I'd just love to hear, how's it changed things for LinkedIn, and what do you see happening? I mean, starting with this notion of virtual communities.
Yeah. So we're definitely seeing a number of secular shifts on the virtual side that we don't think go back. So first is virtual communities, where we are obviously a virtual community, but we're seeing now more than ever people want going on LinkedIn because they want to connect. They want a sense of community. They're trying to figure out. They're looking for access to jobs, to skills, to news. So record levels of engagement on the platform, record levels of connections and conversations between members on LinkedIn. So I think there's the virtual community piece that I don't think we ever lose, because it's been incredibly powerful to people to have the connections that they've had. This move to virtual events and experiences is very real. So I think the LinkedIn team, along with many other companies, moved almost overnight to no in-person events. Part of that was we had no choice based on the lockdown. But I think for a lot of us too, we looked at, it's an opportunity for us to really lean into, how do you do events differently? What does a solely virtual event look like? And I don't think we'll ever go back to standalone in-person events the way they were. The benefit you can get with scale, we're seeing most of our events are 1.5 to 2, if not more times more attendance when they're virtual. So, Adobe just did their annual in-person summit using LinkedIn Live. They usually see, I think, around 20 to 25K attendees, had over 40K attendees. They had 40% higher organic engagement than they do in their typical campaigns. And I think that's pretty much what we're seeing across the board, which is in a virtual environment, much higher levels of engagement, much higher levels of being able to reach people where they are. So I don't think that goes back. And I think we're learning a lot around how you do virtual events. You can't just take a physical event and move it online. People aren't going to sit for 8 hours the way they did. So much more customized content, much more kind of bite-sized chunks, much more engagement. But all of that to me is incredibly positive, and I think that sticks for a long time. Virtual sales, we are obviously in the sales space as well. Salespeople had to stop traveling immediately, and they've gotten really good at using LinkedIn and other tools to sell online. We've seen a 54% year-over-year increase in engagement from sales reps and leaders on the LinkedIn platform. Wow. And we've just seen sales professionals learning how to sell virtually, so engaging with our learning content is up over 100% year over year. So I think even as travel comes back and other things, I think a lot of the ways we've learned to connect and sell virtually won't go back. And then one that I'm particularly just excited about is virtual learning. We've just seen massive spikes in people taking this time to go, in our case, we have the data about LinkedIn, but going across the board to learn new skills, to position for kind of where the jobs are going to be. In March, we saw 4 million of hours of learning content accessed on LinkedIn, which was a 50% increase month over month. And then in April, that jumped to 7.7 million hours of learning was consumed on LinkedIn. And that was 5 times the amount of the year before. So we're seeing people, right now, the most popular courses are time management, working from home, learning Zoom, managing stress. Going forward, we're spending a lot of time helping analyze where the jobs are. There are jobs available in this economy. So really helping people who are unemployed or finding themselves unemployed understand where those jobs are and what are the skills that they can acquire now for those jobs that are available now and where the jobs will be. So I think this virtual learning component is here to stay as well.
Wow. Yeah, I guess I'd love to dig in there a bit more and talk about who's using the LinkedIn platform well in this context. What examples would you point to there?
Yeah. So, like I mentioned, we're seeing a significant increase in just activity on the platform. So, people are engaging. We're seeing a 54% increase year over year in conversations. So, this to us is incredibly important. It's when we know that people are kind of having an exchange back and forth. Um, we're seeing people come to LinkedIn for news. So, one of the things we've really invested in this time, COVID, and then um, more recently in the Black Lives Matter, um, is just a desire for trusted news. And so we've really leaned into the role that LinkedIn can play. We now have the largest business publication that's delivered to the world daily. So 46 million people get it daily across 96 countries in 9 languages. And we're 2 times the subscribers we were a year ago. So I think people just really craving, give me the facts, give me information that's curated and trusted. And then, like, I'm interested in opinions, but I just kind of want to base that in a core. I don't know if you've seen what Johnson and Johnson's been doing on the platform, but it's been fascinating. They have done a video series called Road to the Vaccine, where using LinkedIn Live, where they've been tracking kind of the steps to get to a vaccine for COVID. And they have seen over 1 million organic views of 5 times the viewing that they've seen on any similar campaign. So I
Wow.
think just, we're seeing a level of innovation that is so much fun and so exciting. It's putting us on our toes. Like, we're definitely feeling the need to make sure our tools like LinkedIn events, like LinkedIn Live, are ready and capable to do what brands are eager to do as it relates to telling their stories and engaging.
That's awesome to hear. Mel, thank you for that. I'm mindful we've got just a couple of minutes left, so I wonder if we should shift to the third shift that we wanted to talk about today, which is really the shift about inequity. There was this kind of theme out there in the early days of COVID-19 that it was somehow a great leveler, but we're seeing it really as amplifying inequality in many ways. COVID-19 itself, and obviously the Black Lives Matter moment. I'd love to hear your thoughts on what are the obligations of business leaders to really address those inequities right now.
Yeah, it's been this is another one that I hope and I think is a really positive change going forward. And I think this expectation for a long time of brands taking stands, but I feel like that was sort of superficial for a while and has gotten a lot more real
Yeah.
fast. And so I can tell you, sort of, for us as a company, we've had a lot of learnings as we've always, our vision has always been to create economic opportunity for every member of the global workforce. So we've benefited from have a vision that really does have a sense of purpose in the world. But we're really seeing kind of the next level of push to make sure that we're realizing that we're investing in it, that we can show meaningful progress both internally and externally towards that. And I think some of the things I've really noticed, words matter, and then actions matter even more. So there is a desire for brands and leaders and companies to speak up and to talk on behalf of the change that needs to happen in the world. But I think we're quickly shifting to, great, your words were there. What actions are you going to put in place, and how is that going to actually manifest itself in the world? I think it's super clear that the work will be hard. I think the aftermath of the George Floyd murder, a lot of it is just super clear that the progress that people may have thought was there wasn't there, and there's just a realization that there's a huge amount of work to do, and it's really hard work to do. I think the thing I take a lot of optimism in is that humans are unique in our capacity to learn and change, and so I do hope and feel that the combination of COVID and and the Black Lives Matter is actually really inspiring a different level of commitment to that capacity to learn and change, and that we actually really can create a better future. But Neil, I imagine Co's been impacted, and you see a lot of different clients. I would be so interested in your perspective on this one as well.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more that it's really the actions are what counts, right now. And I think that's humbling. I mean, we've made donations, we're matching employee donations, but it's the tip of the iceberg of what we need to address. And we're realizing we have to really think differently about how we hire and how we run the company. We're fortunate that we've got a very active DEI group at Co that are really pushing us and supporting us in that. So I feel very fortunate for that team. But as you said, there is a lot of work to be done. Just to close out, I'd love to ask you, just to change gears for 1 second, if you had to leave people with one thing from this conversation, what would you leave them with?
Strong belief that we're more powerful together than we are apart. I think we're at this juncture. I feel like both internally in our company and externally in society, where we have a choice where we can come together, we can push each other, we can learn together, we can accept differences and kind of come together to create changes, or we can continue to fracture and pull apart. And I really think we're more powerful together. So my deep hope is that we'll use this time to really come together, to make the changes that need to happen.
Well, thank you so much, Mel. It's been great chatting with you. I look forward to discussing this more in the live Q&A that's to follow.
Absolutely. Thanks, Neil.
Thanks a lot, Mel. Thank you all. This is Collision from Home.